then Noctie does not have to move the rook, because then she could capture on knight, and then we would trade 2- for a rook. Hey guys, this is Andy from Noctie, and today we're gonna go through the weekly scenario for week 40 of 2025. So let's take a look at this week's scenario. This week's position comes from the opening Semi-Averbakh against the King's Indian defense. And in fact, we've made a course on this together with FIDE master Adrian Söderström. Feel free to check it out on the repertoires if you want to learn the entire Semi-Averbakh system against the King's Indian defense. It's a very interesting opening where you get often very nice positional advantages against Black's King's Indian and without learning too much theory. So let's take a look at our position. We are at move 14, and this is under the variation when Black plays a6 on the 6th move. But let's just go back from the beginning and step through the moves leading up to this position. So as we said, it's a system against the King's Indian defense. So we start out with d4, and Black plays knight f6. So leading to a variety of Indian openings. We could have the Nimzo Indian or King's Indian, or sometimes perhaps the Grunfeld or Benoni. So here the main line, of course, is to play c4. And here when Black plays g6, he basically declares that, all right, now it's either going to be the King's Indian or the Grunfeld. White continues with knight c3, a logical move. Black plays bishop g7. And here we are heading into a King's Indian defense. And Black's idea is basically to give the center to White and then strike back at it with pawn breaks. And here, when given the opportunity, White of course should grab the center with e4, building up a nice control. And now Black plays d6, and here comes the starting move of the Semi-Averbakh. So here, on the 5th move, White plays bishop e2. So this is an interesting move. We delay the development of the g1 knight and basically sees how Black will react. And later on, we'll also play h3, basically limiting the activity of Black's light squared bishop. So yeah, Black castles, and now comes bishop e3, developing the other bishop. And as we see, we're still waiting before we develop the g1 knight. Here at Black's 6th move, there are a lot of different choices. And in his course, FIDE master Adrian Söderström covers all the 7 most popular moves here for Black. And we have different approaches ranging everything from a6, c6, knight b to d7, and of course the main line e5 as well as c5. It should also be considered as one of the most challenging lines. But here in this case we cover the a6 variation. Black plays a modern move, preparing a pawn break on the flank, while still delaying which pawn break that he should play for in the center. And now White plays h3, limiting the Black's light squared bishop, because now White can play knight f3 without worrying about the pin of the light squared bishop. And here Black plays c6, now basically preparing the b5 pawn break, and by playing c6 they are giving up the c5 pawn break. So instead it's going to be e5 in the center that they're going to play for, and b4 on the flank. So here White instead grabs the opportunity to push e5 himself, grabbing space and also preventing Black from the e5 pawn break. Knight goes to d7, and now we trade a pair of pawns and put our knight finally on f3. A recurring pattern in this system is that, as we saw, the g1 knight is often delayed before developing to f3. And the reason is that we often want to play h3 first, removing the g4 square for Black's light squared bishop. And here Black follows through with the plan of pushing on the queen side with b5. And here White can simply castle. Black trades a pair of pawns, opening up the b file in order for the rook to grab it sometime. And here White takes back the pawn, and now black continues development. So here black plays knight b6, developing the knight and also attacking our bishop. So here we can see that white has developed all the minor pieces, while black still has 2 pieces left to be developed. On the other hand, white has a d4 pawn here that is an isolated queen's pawn that could either turn into an asset or a vulnerability if black manages to get their pieces out. So here we put in a nice intermezzo, an intermediate move that forces black to first react to our threat. We are of course hitting the queen, so the queen goes to c7, and now we play bishop b3. And here black continues to develop with knight b to d7. And now we are at move 14, and here it is the start of our weekly scenario. So let's see here how white should approach this. Well, as we mentioned, white has a lead in development, and also we have an isolated queen's pawn. And this isolated queen's pawn, I think, is the most important factor here that shapes the strategic plans for both sides. The isolated queen's pawn is a double-edged sword if used wisely, meaning that if white manages to get activity for the pieces, it can turn into a nice attacking asset. But on the other hand, if black manages to get the pieces out, often creating a blockade, it will instead turn into a weakness. So here, a common idea is to play around the open fouls of the isolated pawns. So here, a logical move for white is to play rook c1. And of course, another alternative would have been to play queen to d2. That is also a very good idea, with the plan of playing queen f4 sometimes to apply pressure here on the d6 pawn. But we'll just take a look at this one line, rook to c1. So we are placing the rook on an open foul, and furthermore we are eyeing black's queen here that could potentially be vulnerable for some pins. And here a natural move for black is to continue their development, placing the bishop on b7. And here a nice move for white that is quite important is to play a4. And there are 2 reasons for this. Well, first of all, we are threatening to play a5, and then the knight here on b6 would have we have some difficulty. And furthermore, we also prevent black from pushing a5 and a4, disturbing our queen side. Black plays a natural move, knight f6, developing the knight to a more active square. And here we can follow through with our plan of pushing a5, grabbing some more space on the queen side, and also forcing black's b6 knight to retreat. So with this move, black unleashes an attack on our a5 pawn with the queen, and this must be somehow answered. So instead of defending it by playing rook a1, we have a clever way of defending it indirectly, and that is to play bishop f4. Now we are eyeing the d6 pawn, and in this case it's bad for black to trade the d pawn for the a pawn, because then our bishop will be very strong and the c6 pawn will turn into a vulnerability. This position plays still complicated, but if we look at the last couple moves, we see that white has made some nice progress. We have grabbed space on the queen side, we are applying pressure here on the d6 pawn, our rook is developed and potentially creating some pinning ideas along the c-file against black's queen. So from here, white would like to play, for example, queen d2, connecting the rooks, and then bring the other rook to e1, grabbing the e-file, and then potentially launch an attack against the black's king, or target these 2 weak pawns in black's camp. So yeah, now it's our turn to play this out against Noctie, and let's see how we do. Alright, so here we are, let's play against Noctie and see if we can win this. So just like we analyzed, I'm gonna go ahead and play rook c1. We are putting the rook on this semi-open foul, and we are creating some potential pinning ideas against black's queen. Okay, Noctie plays bishop b7, developing her bishop. And here I'm gonna follow the game plan and play a4, grabbing space on the queen side and threatening a5. And nice, we got a purple move, so happy to see that Noctie agrees with our idea. Okay, interesting. Noctie plays a5, stopping our a5 move ourselves. But it's marked as dubious, so perhaps we have some tricky stuff here. The immediate thing that sticks out is that when Noctie played a5, the a-pawn is leaving control of the b5 square. So now we could jump in with the knight, because remember, the queen here is vulnerable, so the c6 pawn is pinned. So let's see. Knight b5, hitting the queen, hitting the pawn. Queen must go to b8 to still defend the pawn here on d6. Then we could play bishop e7, hitting the rook and hitting the pawn once again. Let's see. Oh, but then Noctie does not have to move the rook, because then she could capture our knight, and then we would trade 2- for a rook. But that isn't good, so we don't want that. Okay, what if we start with bishop e7? Hitting the rook, hitting the pawn. Rook e8. Now we play knight b5, hitting the queen, and also adding another attacker on the d6 pawn. And when the queen moves, we can grab it with our bishop. Yeah, let's go with that. Bishop e7. Nice, we got a blue move, so I'm feeling optimistic about this. Okay, and now knight b5. The queen must move, and now we grab the pawn. So here it's important to take with the bishop. If we take with the knight, then our bishop will be hanging. So it's important to grab it with the bishop. And now we're hitting the queen. So let's see where the queen moves. And all right, that is wild. Wow. So Noctie sacrifices her queen. Strange. Or perhaps that makes sense, because if the queen would have moved, for example, to d8, then our knight would have jumped to c7, forking the rooks, and then we will win an exchange, in addition to being a pawn up. But here, yeah, we just take the queen, of course, and when Noctie takes back, let's see how the material balance is. So Noctie would have 2- for queen and a pawn. Okay, Noctie does not take back immediately. She takes the a4 pawn first. So we will lose the bishop pair, but on the other hand, yeah, we are up a queen, so we are obviously very much ahead and should be winning this. But still, there's some complications that we need to be aware of. So the first thing here is, do we save our dark squared bishop or our light squared bishop? I mean, we could take this pawn. Noctie takes our bishop. Let's see. Perhaps we could be tricky too. How about bishop takes f7 check? King takes, knight takes, king goes back, and then we can save our dark squared bishop. And the king will be quite vulnerable. So yeah, let's go with this. Nice. Another purple move. And here, in with the knight. King moves, and now let's see. Yeah, now it makes sense to save our bishop. I'll put it on d6. Alright, so we have a queen in exchange for 2-. Actually, an interesting imbalance. Okay. Bishop there. What do we do? What do we do? I'm gonna play, let's see, I think queen d3, yes. Activating our queen, we could go to b5 sometime, as well as queen g3. Okay, black improves the knight. And here, how about we jump into the 7th rank? Let's see. Let's see. Yeah, let's do that. Threatening our bishop. Here I think we can play bishop e5. We should be cautious though of some tricks. Let's see if black can take. We take back. But then the bishop here does not have any discovered checks. So yeah, our queen should be safe. And now we are threatening to take the knight. Yeah, so this move makes sense because now the knight could capture back. So here, yeah, let's just play rook e1, a simple move. We are protecting the bishop. And of course, every piece exchange should be favorable to us. Okay, Noctie takes. And here, how do we take back? Do we take back with the pawn or the rook? Let's just go with the rook, offering a rook exchange. And notice here that there are no discoveries because the rook here is also hanging. So if our king would have been on h1, then it will be a different story because then the bishop takes g2 will be with check. Okay, bishop f8, let's see. I'm considering queen a6, hitting the knight here, and also planning to play queen a7. But the problem is that if we play queen a6, then they have bishop d6, forking our rooks. But then we could just grab this, right? Yeah, queen a6 should be fine. Okay, they fork our rooks, but now we take with check. They must take with the knight, because otherwise taking with the rook would hang the bishop. So they took with the knight, and here, can't we just grab this pawn? Let's do it. And see here if we can have a mating attack or not. Let's see. Queen a7 perhaps, hitting the knight. Let's do that. Now we're threatening checkmating 1. Okay, they defend. And now let's play queen c7, hitting their rook. So here we see the clear dominance of the queen, especially when black's pieces are uncoordinated. So a queen can, by herself, infiltrate the position and create multiple threats. Okay. Here we can play queen d7, and we just have to be careful of any back ranks, but rook e1 check is fine. We can simply play king h2. So yeah, let's go with queen d7. We're now threatening the bishop. Bishop e6, let's see. Here I think we have a nice tactical trick, so feel free to pause for a moment if you want to try and find it. But we got a nice removing the defender tactic. So here the knight is basically holding everything together here in black's camp, protecting the rook and the bishop. But we can grab it with check, and when blacks take back, we can simply grab the rook. So yeah, let's do that. And now we take the rook with check. Black goes there, and now we can grab the bishop. And very soon we'll have a checkmate, I think. So let's see here. Here I'm gonna play h4. Now we are threatening checkmate in 2 with queen there. Here I'm gonna play queen g8, threatening checkmate. What can Noctie do? Okay, the king is running. The king is running. But now we give a check. Now f3. We are threatening to push the pawn. If the king grabs, we can take the bishop. And now we take the bishop. And here we have a mating one with queen h2. All right, nice, we did it. All right, so this week's scenario was a very interesting position from the Semi-Averbakh system against the King's Indian defense. And as we saw, we could simply play natural moves, rook c1, developing the rook, grabbing the open foul, and soon we had a nice tactical opportunity with knight b5 and bishop e7, winning the important d6 pawn. Although Noctie misplayed a little and made some inaccuracies, allowing this opportunity, it still shows how dangerous the position is for black and that they must be very, very careful. And feel free to check out the full course on the Semi-Averbakh system if you want to learn a very effective and logical yet quite simple system against the King's Indian defense. I'll put the links down in the description. So yeah, as always, thank you so much for watching and happy playing. Bye bye!